Manual can be scary for some of us, but it gives you the most flexibility. So here you can adjust all three parameters: ISO, the aperture, and the shutter speed. Right? So if I adjust one, only the exposure compensation seems to be moving. So what it's telling you is that it's either overexposed or underexposed. Now let's say I'm in a situation where the subject is not going to remain still. That means I want to take the picture quickly. So I want the shortest exposure time that I think will give me a good exposure without movement. Now this is still too dark. You can see the histogram is all bunched up on the left side. So what else can I do? You can try to open the aperture, but it's at its maximum for this lens at 1.4. It's still underexposed. So then we can try the ISO. And so thereby you've maintained your desired depth of field, meaning if you don't want the book in the background or something in the background to be in focus, or you don't want the plane of focus to be too wide, you can still get a good exposure if you put it in manual. So you have the most flexibility in manual. What I like to do sometimes is use auto ISO, especially in well-lit situations, right? And then so what I'm left with to do is change the exposure compensation. So I can tell the camera I need more light or less light. What that does, let's say I wanted a brighter image. Then when I take a preview by half pressing the shutter button, it will tell me the ISO that I will get at this setting. Let's say I wanted even more light. Now this is obviously overexposed. As you can see on the histogram, it's all the way to the right, but let's just, for argument's sake, use this setting. Now the ISO is 8000. And then if we use the exposure compensator dial and go all the way down in the opposite direction, saying, let's say this is what we consider to be an ideal exposure, the ISO will now be lower. So before it was 8000, now it's 200. That's in auto ISO. This is very useful if you're in a well-lit situation. Either you're controlling the light or it's daylight or everything is bright enough, so there's no risk of using a high ISO. You can also limit that, but the important thing here is manual gives you the most flexibility because then you can control everything. And then in manual you can still use auto ISO, but this, in my experience, is most useful for well-lit situations.